So for the beginning of this drawing, I really want to set up my time, or use my time to set up my construction. So I'm patiently building that underlying framework. Okay, so I have the flow for each limb, I have the length for each limb. Basically, placement is done. So now I'm working on my big form, the most dominant forms. I'm looking at, here's her narrowest part of the waist. That's where I swing through to have the base of the rib cage. Then I'm looking for where would be that belt line, that aces point, noticing how wide the squishy middle portion is. So I have my oval for the rib cage, my more circular shape for the pelvis because I'm seeing it from the side. Thinking about the rim, if I make this circle now into a bowl. And I'm keeping this stuff light because the goal of this drawing will be to put some shadow patterns over it. But I do want you guys to see the construction, so I'm putting it in a little bit darker than I maybe usually would. I'm starting to fill out the width for the body, just using ovoids. I'm snapping some rubber bands around it. This arm here is a cylinder. Here's the hand. I'm just going for the outer shape of the hand. Let's do the next arm. Boxy wrist, so you see how there is this tendon right here. So that's where the plane change happens from the side to the underside. So in my drawing, I made this a boxy endpoint. Hand goes behind her head. Let's bring more dimension through to the head. Place the ear. Make the neck into a tube. All right, so if you look at the drawing now, I have simple volumes, so no bumps for muscles yet. So that is my next phase. I want to have a really good, a really solid framework to put my shadow mapping over it. So I'm looking at any portions on her that I know are muscle or fat volumes. So here, this little tail is from the pectoralis muscle, which sits right here. So I'm kind of giving myself a little line right here. Right around here, we have the deltoid, so I'm going to grab that. Anything that stands out as curvy, so like here, this little curve, I'm going to just see where does that belong to. But mainly I want to put that work in areas where there's shadow. So over here, and I have the breast tissue on the other side as well. Okay, here's another bump for the shoulder. Okay, so now I have simple volumes plus a few key lumps and bumps, which will translate into the muscle anatomy. And now I know enough for how to adjust my shadow patterns. So I'm going to begin right here on the arm because I feel like it's very clear to see that shadow separation. And so just coming back to the reference, when I shadow map, I never begin in the middle of the shading. So I really want you to hear me on this. I always begin with the outer edges of the shadow, and I trace or follow that path. So for a form shadow, I use the side of my pencil to make a softer mark. For a cast shadow edge, I use a thinner mark. So when you're in front of a live model, so in photographs it's easier to see what's shadow and what's light, especially if there's a strong light source on it. But if you're in front of the real model, you really have to squint, and not just squint while staring at one area, but squint and zooming out to see a big segment of the figure all at one glance. So, okay, I have now this inner edge of the shadow tracing all along here. So now I need the outer edge, meaning the outer edge of the body, to make this pattern good. So the outer edge of the body gets a thinner line. I'm paying close attention to when the contour changes direction. What do I mean by that? Contour goes this way, changes direction, changes direction, changes direction, changes direction. So there are different apex points, and as we have apex points, the contour changes direction. And we want to reflect that really mindfully. All right, so now, let me just finish this last segment down here. Now I have a fully mapped out pattern. So remember, a pattern is a fully enclosed shape. This here is a pattern. This here is not. This here is just a line, but it doesn't have a closing. So this is what we're looking for when we shadow map. We need an enclosed pattern, and then we can shade it in. And we shade it in just flat. No tone variation. No darker accents. No lighter portions. Just one even tone. Okay, so let's get into the next area. I won't talk as much for the next one. Let's do the one on the arm. Pectoralis, bicep, let's do here the hand. And now let's get into the leg. So the leg is a little bit tricky on this one because look at how diffused that thigh is. So now I have to make a decision. We never want to be just in mere copy mode. We always want to be decision making, translating, deciding how can I best show what's happening here. So I think given that the light's coming from this angle, kind of like actually this angle, I'm going to try what happens if I put the core shadow here. I feel like here it's a little bit lighter still, and then here it's a little bit darker. So I'm going to try to see what happens. And a lot of drawing is figuring it out, experimenting. And then if it doesn't work, you try something different. Guess it would help if you could see it. Sorry about the camera, it's just I'm holding it with my hand, my left hand while I'm drawing. Sometimes I don't notice when you can't see what I'm doing. Okay, so let's see what happens. Let me finish out the under edge of that leg. So in these situations, when it's not entirely clear if you're dealing with a shadow or a light mass, You make your best guess, and then if you don't like it, you try a different version. And the other thing I wanted to say, when you're practicing, choose images that have a clear light shadow separation. So, some photographers, they use two lights, so that they kind of put a lot of fill light into the shadow side, and those are useless for a shadow mapping exercise, because you want to have the shadows, so you don't want to have everything lit. Okay, so for the purpose of a shadow mapping exercise where I'm not interested in full value, this would be probably where I'd end. The last step is I would grab my kneaded eraser and take out any of that construction stuff to really clean up the edges of my shadow pattern. So one last time, shadow mapping is all about the edges of your patterns and the clarity of your patterns. If you erase out all the rest except just the shadow patterns, you should still be able to get a sense for what it is that you're looking at.